It's quite brutal, but it's a game. So when you learn how to play the game, actually, it becomes a lot easier. Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Now, I've got a little bit of a different kind of episode today. It's just me. I don't have a guest with me today, and that is because I'm going to be talking about a topic that has been coming up a bit in the conversations that I've been having with my guests over the last few weeks, and some of the ones I've got recorded as well. There's a lot of people talking about job precarity in the research adjacent world, and things like short contracts, partial contracts, the fact that if you want to get promotion, you often have to leave rather than staying where you are. Now, I can't fix the job sector, unfortunately, if only. But one thing that maybe I can do is to help make that process of finding and getting a new job a little less painful. The reason for that is because I have been on, I don't even know how many, dozens of recruitment panels and read literally hundreds of applications over the years I've been working in this area. So I might have some things that might be useful. So what I'll be covering in this podcast today is where to look for research adjacent jobs, how to improve your chances of being shortlisted once you do find a job you're interested in, a little bit about what to expect at interviews, and the aftermath, what happens afterwards, whether you get the job or not. And stay tuned right to the end for 2 top tips that will always improve your chances of getting shortlisted. So first of all, where to look for research adjacent jobs. What I think I'll do with this actually is I'll start a thread on Twitter. So you will have other suggestions, I'm sure, that I haven't mentioned. So please contribute to that, and I'll put it together into a blog post that hopefully will be a really useful resource on research adjacent jobs. But some of the places that could be good to start with. Jobs.ac.uk is a really obvious one if you're looking for a job in the UK. But sometimes actually finding the research adjacent jobs on there can be really difficult because they are under all kinds of different sections. I've seen them under the academic section, I've seen them under the professional services section, all kinds of different categories there. So if you do go to jobs.ac.uk, be prepared to have a bit of a rummage around when you get there. Another place that I've seen a lot of research adjacent jobs is on LinkedIn, and particularly that will match up things like your profile, and you can search for words that you're interested in and that sort of thing. And another great place if you're looking for jobs is to find relevant mailing lists. A couple of ones that I'm on are on Jiskmail. So if you go to jiskmail.ac.uk, I'll put a link because Jisk is JISC, jiskmail.ac.uk. A couple of lists I'm on are SciComm, which is PSCI-com, COMM, and NCCPE-PEN. And they're great sources for jobs if you're looking for something around science communication or engagement. But obviously, there's lots of other kind of research adjacent jobs as well. So that's one of the things that I hope maybe people can contribute on Twitter, and we can put together a list of some useful mailing lists. Then I would encourage you to think not just about jobs in universities as well. And certainly there are a lot of what I would call research adjacent jobs in places like charities, in the private sector, in industry, in the arts, in the civil service, in the NHS. So have a look around. Don't restrict your options to universities necessarily. Some useful websites that I've found, there's one called charityjob.co.uk, which has lots of things like communications officers in charities. That sort of job comes up there a lot. Engagement managers, community managers, that sort of thing. If you're looking for a job in the natural world, then environmentjob.co.uk is quite helpful. And again, they have lots of education and communications type jobs, is one of the things I've noticed there. And if you're interested in the arts and museum section, then if you search for museum jobs, Leicester University hosts a really useful jobs board there as well. And as I said, don't forget about places like the civil service and the NHS as well. And if you have a look, they both have their own job services. So if you look for civil, I'm pretty sure it's just called Civil Service Jobs, and NHS Careers, I think is their website. I'll find the definite links and put them in the show notes. But lots of research adjacent jobs there. Civil service, obviously, particularly if you're interested in policy type work, and the NHS for health related research jobs there. So once you've found a job that you want to apply for, the next stage is to actually put your application in. And one of the particular reasons I wanted to do this podcast is because a lot of people don't realise that shortlisting for these kind of jobs in universities and also in other organisations like the civil service and the NHS is very formulaic. So it isn't that somebody reads your CV and thinks, oh, they're good or they're not good. What happens is the applications are scored quite specifically against this person's specification. And so it's really important that in your application, whether that's a CV, cover letter, whatever they've asked for, is that you really focus on showing how you meet the person's specification, especially the essential criteria. And this is not a joke. I have had times where we've been recruiting for jobs that needed a driving licence. So this is a really easy, obvious one to mention, but there's been similar examples. Those people might have had a driving licence and they just thought, well, of course I've got a driving licence, so I'm not going to put it on the application. But because it was for a job that involved travelling, going out to schools, if they didn't mention that they had a driving licence anywhere in the application, that application goes in the bin. And I know that sounds really harsh, but that is the way that the shortlisting works. The person doing the shortlisting might have hundreds applications, which is, often it's not that many, but it's not unheard of to sift through. And so you need to make it easy for them, and they're both looking for easy ways to keep people in, but also easy ways to keep people out. So it's really important that you don't make the person who's doing the recruitment hunt for the information. So don't just bury it somewhere in your CV. Make sure that you bring front and centre those things which are in the person specification in particular. And when you are writing about what you've done, it's really important that you give examples and focus on what you did to make something a success. So when I say that things are scored, here's to give you an example. I used to do a lot of event management, which is why I've used this as an example. If somebody just puts, I have managed a number of different events, that will maybe get them a 1 in the scoring. They probably wouldn't get a 0. 0 usually means you haven't mentioned it at all, but it might get them a 1. But here's an example of what you would need to do to get you a 3. So in 2020, I organised a conference for 100 people. My role was to manage the logistics, including venue catering, accommodation and AV setup. I collaborated with a colleague who was responsible for the conference content. Post-event feedback was excellent, and attendees were particularly impressed at the event organisation, with 80% rating it as excellent. So what's different about that isn't just that you've given more detail, but it's that you have said specifically what it was that you contributed, and you've given some evidence of what impact that made. So the fact that the feedback on the event was excellent. And that's the kind of answer that you would need to do to get you a 3. And that can be the difference between getting shortlisted and not getting shortlisted sometimes. Now, there's a lot more that I would love to tell you about improving your chances of getting shortlisted. So I am running an online training on Monday the 27th of February from 5 till 6. And so if you want to know more about how to improve your chances of getting shortlisted and understanding this quite brutal shortlisting process, it's quite brutal, but it's a game. So when you learn how to play the game, actually, it becomes a lot easier. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the show notes to get you to the training. Or if you go to Eventbrite and search for Get Shortlisted, that should find the training there for you. So hopefully you get shortlisted and then you've got an interview. And again, it's quite formulaic in places like universities and charities and the civil service and that sort of thing. The questions will be based on the job specification and the person specification. They won't just throw in random things out there to throw you off. I think that's more something that happens in industry rather than in places like universities. So like with the shortlisting process, make sure you've thought about how you meet that job specification and person specification, and have examples to hand that can explain what you can do and what you've done in the past. Particularly, it's really common to get asked things like, can you explain a situation when this happened, or you had to deal with a difficult client or a difficult situation, or that sort of thing. So it's thinking about those answers beforehand can help you feel a lot more calm. And it's worth knowing that you will probably always be asked why you want the job and why you think you are a good fit for the job. So be prepared to answer those kind of questions. And don't be surprised if you're asked to do other tasks like presentations or written exercises. They're actually really good opportunities to demonstrate different kinds of skills, because I know that some people just go to pieces in interviews. And I have been on the panel sometimes, and your heart goes out to the person on the other side of the table, because you can see from their CV that they're a really good candidate, but they just can't get their answers out. So actually, tasks like presentations and written exercises can be really helpful. And another tip for you when it comes to interviews that you might be surprised at: be nice to absolutely everyone, even if you're stressed and even if you think you're never going to see those people again. And I mean people like the security guard that lets you in at the gate, the receptionist who meets you on arrival, even if you bump into a cleaner in the toilets, because it's really common for the recruiters to actually go and ask people like that what they thought of the candidates. I will quite often ask the person who met the candidates when they arrived what they were like. Not that you're going to let them make the decision, but actually it's just a way of seeing what that person is like when they're not on show. So that is something that it's worth knowing might be happening behind the scenes. So what next? Obviously, hopefully, you get the job. But one of the things that just makes me genuinely really angry, I think it is such bad practice and it's so disrespectful of people's time and effort, is to just say, if you don't hear anything, assume you've been unsuccessful. I think that is appalling practice. Unfortunately, I don't have control over the world. But because of that, I think it's really acceptable to follow up if you don't hear something, even if it means that you get bad news. But often there might be a situation where, for example, you're the second choice candidate and they're waiting to hear back from the first choice candidate, and that's why you haven't heard. And so, just because you haven't heard anything doesn't necessarily mean it's bad news, but it is okay to follow up. You might just want to think carefully about who you get in touch with for follow up and make sure that you do it graciously. Another thing I would encourage you to do is whatever the outcome, but particularly if it's a negative outcome, is to ask for feedback, but make sure that you are genuinely open to hearing that feedback. Most recruiters really want you to do well. So they realise that it takes a lot of time and effort to apply for jobs, and they want you to be successful and they want you to do the best interview that you can. So they will make notes on what you did well and what you didn't do well. And from my experience in places like universities, those are actually kept for sort of data protection, whatever you call it, not data, freedom of information, that sort of stuff. So there will be a record of that somewhere. And even it might be that with the shortlisting, they might be able to tell you, well, you scored well on this, but you didn't score as well on this. So it's really okay to ask for feedback, but make sure that you are open to hearing it. And if you don't get shortlisted, if you don't get the job, the first thing I want you to know is that it probably wasn't about you. So often I've been in a recruitment panel and we've had to make those decisions are genuinely really, really difficult. And sometimes you have to think not just about the person who's sitting in front of you, but also how they would fit within the team. And so it might be about the balance of skills within the team. And so they're looking for somebody who can complement the people that they've already got in place, and that's something that you have no control over. It might also be something like you've got quite a long notice period at the job you're in, somebody else was available to start sooner, maybe other things that are out of your control, like somebody else just had more experience, different qualifications, just, showed up differently on the day. But it really, as I say, so often it is not actually about you. So try your best. I know it's hard, but try your best not to take it personally. And also try to focus on what you learn from the experience and what you could do differently next time. And that actually, I think, is the most important thing you can take from any recruitment process, is to see what you can learn for next time, because there'll always be a next time. Even if you think you're in a permanent job now, there's always a next time. You just never know what's coming down the line. So I promised you that as we came to the end, there would be 2 top tips which will improve your chances of getting through job recruitment processes. And these are those top tips. Number 1, if there is a named contact in the job advert, get in touch with them. Now, that's often, so it'll say something like, if you've got any questions, please contact this person. Now, there's 2 reasons for doing that. The first one is that you then put your name in their head, and it's a way of putting yourself subconsciously ahead of the game, because people like people that they've met, that people that they know. So once they know your name, they know a little bit about you, they're more likely to go, oh yes, when it comes, the application goes, oh yes, I remember them. They asked a really good question about this thing. And subconsciously they will score you better. That's just human beings. And the second reason for doing it is actually it's an opportunity to really find out what they're looking for. Job adverts, particularly places like the ones I've seen that are particularly bad for this, are universities, the NHS and the civil service. Sometimes the job advert doesn't actually really tell you very much about the job. So it's a really good opportunity to ask some questions. It's also an opportunity to ask up front things like if they would be willing to make it a hybrid post or flexible working, or, who are the other, get a sense of what they're really looking for. So if there's a named contact, always get in touch with them. And my other top tip is that if you are in a job already, or if you are, you work with like a charity or something like that, volunteering, offer to be on the panel. So it's really common in big organisations that they like to have sort of an external person on the panel. So often you can go to the HR department and say, oh, I'm willing to be the external person on the panel. You're doing HR a favour, because often they really struggle to fill those external places on the panels. But it's a brilliant opportunity for you, because it means that you will get to see the process from the other side. And I'm a great believer that the fastest way to learn how to do a good application is to get that opportunity to look at lots of other people's applications. And the best way to do a better interview is to get the opportunity to be on an interview panel yourself. And then it'll help you understand as well that those people are not horrible and they're not trying to make your life miserable. They actually genuinely want you to do the best that you can do. So those are my top tips for improving your chances of getting shortlisted. So just to finish off, just a reminder is that if you are currently looking for jobs and you want to know a bit more about how to improve your chances of getting through that shortlisting process, then come along to my online training, which is going to be Monday the 27th of February, 5 till 6, and follow the link in the show notes or search for Get Shortlisted on Eventbrite and you will find the link to sign up for that. And finally, just a reminder that I will start a thread on Twitter about places to find research adjacent jobs. So if you contribute to that, then I will put everything together and I'll put together a blog post, and that will make for a really useful resource for anybody looking for research adjacent jobs in the future. And that is it for this episode. Thanks very much for tuning in. Next week, I'll be back with another guest, another interview podcast. But for now, thanks for listening and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. You can find show notes and other episodes at researchadjacent.com. I would absolutely love to hear what you think of the show, so please get in touch. You can drop us a message via researchadjacent.com or find us on social media at resadjacent. And if you've enjoyed the show, please think about sharing it, subscribing or leaving a review so that other people can find us too. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.